Hey guys, how's it going? My name's Joe. Welcome to SNES is Life. This is going to be my first attempt at an actual YouTube video, I guess. So I know, I mean, if you watch the stream, you know I'm not professional, semi at best. So I don't have the greatest camera. It's obviously not like a widescreen thing. But I'm also going to keep this video pretty simple. I'm going to talk about something I know about, and we're going to discuss light guns. I'm just going to flip through. I got a big table next to me with all these things laid out. And we're going to just kind of hit on each one that I own. I'm not the gaming historian. I'm not, Retronauts. I don't know everything there is to be known about it. But I love light guns. When you talk about arcade games, you would go to the arcade. You would play these big, grandiose games. You can see my Final Fight over there in the corner. Light guns were what brought the arcade home to me. Some people were satisfied with the big joysticks that Sega and Nintendo had back in the day in the 16-bit era, like early 90s. I thought that gun games were it, man, because I grew up, I remember playing Duck Hunt, and then when you get to the arcades, when I finally was old enough to really remember the arcades, Area 51, Maximum Force, Lethal Enforcers, Time Crisis, just those games were it. And I'm 40. I've got the time and disposable income to buy everything that I want. And if I own a light gun, I've got a game for it, and it works because I don't keep broken things. So we'll start with the real basics here. NES Zapper. It's got that nice click to it. Beautiful, functional, just sleek and very space age looking. Match the original Nintendo. I have one of the grays. So they did end up making these with orange barrels eventually, because of the worry that a police officer might see a kid running around with this on the street, think it's a real gun, and shoot them, which is fair, I guess. I don't know. I had a bunch of laser tag games when I was a little kid, so those guns looked. I mean, if a little kid points a gun at you, it's gonna, it's hard to blame the cop. You have a split second to decide whether that's the toy or not. But so everybody remembers Duck Hunt for this one. Nothing wrong with Duck Hunt. And I have a bunch of other games. You've got, oh shoot. Of course, now that I'm talking about it, my brain shuts down. Barker Bill's Trick Shooting, Gumshoe, which is a real weird one. I've got Freedom Force and Wild Gunman and Hogan's Alley. But Duck Hunt's really where this one lives. For the original NES, you love the Zapper. And I'm going to make a bunch of noise as I set things down because I have too many. Here's another weird one for the NES. This is the only other gun that they have that I know about. This is the Konami Laser Scope. Doesn't really fit on the adult head. It was made for kids, man. But here's your IR sensor. And this little blue tabby, there's a red LED that puts a reticle on there. And you move around and you yell, shoot, 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 shoot. And that's how the stupid thing fired. And it was actually shockingly accurate. They did actually make a game specifically for it called Laser Invasion, which is a real interesting game because it goes through a bunch of different gameplay genres. So there's a first-person maze navigation thing, kind of like Shadowgate, where you use your controller, and then you're in a helicopter and you're using this thing, shoot, shoot, shoot. It was just a really interesting game. I do have that. I've never finished it, but the Konami Laser Scope is a real interesting piece of history, and while I said, like I said, it's accurate, I don't use it. If I'm going to play a game, generally speaking, I'll just use my Zapper because I don't want to put undue strain on the head strap for that thing. That's a lot. Next up, sticking with Nintendo. Nintendo in the 16-bit era gave us the Super Scope. It is a bazooka, and God love them. It's just one of the most ridiculous things you can come up with. And what kid didn't want to hold a bazooka? Now, for you lefties, you can actually adjust the scope to the other side. But I can't. I mean, being a righty, I can't imagine playing with that. Nintendo actually supported this fairly well. I think there are 12 games for it. I own half of them or more. I've owned most of them at some point, and then sold them or got rid of them based on whether they were worth playing. The best ones are without a doubt Metal Combat and Metal Combat was the second one. I can't remember the first one. Metal Combat was a sequel to it, though. So, Super Scope, very cool. Definitely worth looking at. Interesting note, 16-bit era, this and the Sega Menacer, which I'm going to pick up in a minute here, used an IR sensor that you had to sit on top of your TV. So, they are the only two that do that, though. I don't know, what changed or what they thought of, but whatever. So here we got the Sega Menacer. Now, the Menacer is arguably just as big and ridiculous as the Super Scope. And the full Menacer actually had 2 eyepieces, one for each side. Mine doesn't. All of this is used. So, again, it's got a reticle you aim down and the scope. And the scope can be switched on sides. The biggest problem with the Menacer is they only made, I think, 2 games that functioned as a cartridge. So you got Menacer 6, which was kind of like Super Scope 6, had like 6 little crappy mini games. And then I think Terminator 2, which was an awful, awful port, also used this natively. Now, they did release, I think, 6 Sega CD games that operated with it. I don't have a Sega CD. I will give them the credit on this, though. The best part about the Menacer is that if you want, you can take these pieces off, and this top piece is always a little more stubborn than the bottom, but, well, it comes off. But then you could basically use it as a pistol, it was kind of cool, thoughtful of them, that you could take that big stock off and use it more as a pistol. You see, if you get this sight piece off, it's just a great loop. Sega Menacer, very cool. There are 2 more guns for the Sega. They go together. They are the Konami Lethal Enforcer Justifiers. Now, these are beautiful guns. They are 6 shooters, based off, I think, the Magnum. Interesting note on these. The blue one came with the base game in a box. The pink one you had to mail order from Japan. And weird, you can't. It's a phone jack. So this one has your standard 6-pin Sega, or 9-pin, sorry. And the pink one actually plugs into the handle of the blue one through that telephone jack, which is real weird. Now, these did not use IR sensors. Well, that was just the Menacer and the Super Scope that used those. But these are beautiful guns. My blue one, the sensor's jacked up. The pink one's very accurate. And the pink ones are real hard to find anymore. I have seen a couple other things done with this mold specifically. I don't know who made the mold for this. But in Canada, they did sell an orange one of these that had the Super Scope guts, I guess, inside of it. And those are real rare, too. I've seen one. I wasn't willing to pay for it. But it's real interesting that they did that. Now, that didn't say Justifier on the side of it. But it's a pretty cool idea. Moving into the PS1 era, we get Namco, who gave us probably the greatest light gun ever in the gun cons. Now, this is a giant, weighty-looking, beautiful weapon. Interestingly, to be more accurate, it had a video tie-in that you teed into the back of your PlayStation, and that continued through the GunCon 2. And it might even be in the GunCon 3. I actually don't have a GunCon 3. Anyway, these came in gray. I think the Japan release had black. And I think I have also seen an orange one, which was the standard after the GunCon one. You got your 2 action buttons here. Just a very large, very cool looking piece. This was obviously Time Crisis, Project Titan, Maximum Force got a port, Area 51 got a port. Point Blank 1, 2, and 3 were all great mini-game shooting gallery games that you could play at home with your friends. There's one called, I think, Jesse James, Revenge of Jesse James or something. It's really awful. There's some definite bad games, but the PS1 GunCon is a wonderful, wonderful piece and hard to knock. Now, moving on, because Konami is still the king, they remade the Justifier. This Justifier is for the PlayStation 1. I don't care for it, frankly. It came in, I've got the blue version, and it came in a green one as well that I've seen. Now, it's much lighter than the other gun, the Namco one, and it's much smaller. But it is very, very accurate, and, when you start, the thing about Namco and Konami is Namco's gun cons were really only designed to play with Namco games. So this doesn't work on Time Crisis. or the point blank games. So to play Maximum Force, Area 51, and all that, you have to have a Justifier. It's a very nice, accurate gun. Good stuff. Next up is a third-party gun that I have. This is the Logic 3 P99K Light Blaster. It's a very small, compact gun. The thing about this is it uses that video tie-in, and you can see here on the side, maybe, there's some selection buttons. You can run this as a GunCon 1 or as Konami Justifier mode, which is why I bought it, because at the time I didn't have a Justifier. Cool thing about this one is it has a slide, and there is a little motor in it, so when you shoot it, it does kick back. It's not a forceful kickback, but it's just kind of a neat thing. It also has a 3.5mm jack in the bottom of the gun for a foot pedal, which I do not have, unfortunately. But from what I've heard, the foot pedals were pretty crappy and tended not to work anyway. I always thought this was kind of neat. Your A and start button here is the little safety clicker on the side of the gun. This is a very cool gun. I got this for like $10, and you don't see them very often, but it's accurate, it's comfortable. I think this is actually more comfortable than the GunCon. It's a little smaller, not quite as heavy. The handle's a little bit better fit for my hand. Very cool. Worth getting. P99 and Logic 3. That's PS1. So now we're moving on to the early 2000s. And PlayStation, Namco gave us the GunCon 2. Now this one's flat orange. Just as accurate as the GunCon 1. Feels a little better in the hand. It's not quite as big or heavy. You do have all your buttons on here, of course. They added a button down here on the grip to for Time Crisis, you know. That way you can easily push that button with the palm of your left hand or right hand if you're holding it like that. And that gets you down behind cover to reload. I love this gun. It is extremely accurate. Uses the USB port on the PlayStation. And I don't have the 3. I think the 3 also uses the USB ports as well, along with having like laser IR things on the sides of your TV, because that's how it works with modern panel TVs. But to me, a gun is always going to be an old CRT type thing. In that same era of the PlayStation 2, the Xbox came out. The GameCube did not have a gun, but the Xbox had 2. Now, Xbox didn't make their own, though. So this is a Mad Catz Light Blaster. This is a really interesting gun. This is for the Xbox. They made one for the PlayStation 2 as well. I think it's blue. You've got a joystick back here on the back. Start and select are inside, so you can just reach up and hit those with your finger. A good clicky trigger. All your buttons. I like this addition. You can put your memory card or your headset puck in the bottom of this thing like a clip. Now, I guess I don't know why. You know, the Xbox, you could put that memory card in there, but it had onboard memory, so you really didn't need a memory card. In fact, I don't even own one. This is actually a really good gun, though. Very accurate. It's got the breakaway cable, just like the regular Xbox controllers, which is cool. I always thought the breakaway cable was a genius idea. And it's a nice gun. You can find these fairly cheap, like $20. The last gun for the regular Xbox is the Behemoth. That is the Pelican Silent Scope Sniper Rifle. This thing's ridiculous. It is about 3 feet long. It also has the breakaway cable, which you can't, it's down there. I wish you could break it away just on up here by the top, but you can't. So what's really interesting about the Silent Scope Pelican Rifle, the scope is not a real scope. It is just a piece of plastic that you look through. But again, you can put your memory card in, but right here is a light sensor, okay? So Silent Scope, everybody knows the reason Silent Scope was awesome in the arcade is it's a giant sniper rifle, and you looked in the scope, and the scope was a smaller screen of the large screen in front of you that zoomed in. So this thing covers that by when there's a knob on the side over here that sets light sensitivity. So when you put your face up to this thing and you block the light from that sensor, your TV screen zooms in on the scoped image, and it's amazingly fun. It's really kind of hard to get it to work correctly because if there's too much light in the room, and depending on what angle that light's coming from, it just kind of blocks it out. One of the other nice things about this is there weren't very many light gun games for the Xbox, but you could take this thing apart, and House of the Dead 3 existed. And House of the Dead 3, if you're a fan of that series, which, again, I love light guns, you use a shotgun. And this one has the pump handle for your shotgun. And you could leave the back piece on there. I don't, because it's a little easier to aim quickly in House of the Dead with that shotgun idea. It's a very, very cool weapon. These are kind of expensive at this point, but I'm very happy to have one in my collection. Moving on up, we get to the Wii, PS3, Xbox 360 era. To my knowledge, the Xbox 360 does not have a light gun. To my knowledge. I could always be wrong. But the Wii and the PS3 had a lot, actually. So the PS3 used the PS Move. Basically everybody following suit after the Wii came out, and their Xbox made the Kinect and PS3 made the PS Move. This is a third-party cradle for the Move controller. The PlayStation Move controller is a lot more solid and well-built. This is kind of cheap, but it works. The problem being, like, in a Time Crisis game, which Time Crisis 4, House of the Dead 4, Time Crisis Raising Storm, those are all on PS3. When you flip to shoot off screen to reload, the cradle top on these tends to open, so you end up having to use a rubber band to hold the damn thing down. But it is comfortable. The PS Move controller's red. It's a little smaller than this one. I don't have one of those because people want like $50 for them, and thanks, but it's just a gun cradle. Like, that's nonsense. I'm going to pass on that nonsense. But it's also a good gun. My biggest issue with the PS Moves is its base camera movement is looking for the glowing ball on the end of this thing, which makes it a lot less accurate, in my opinion, than the CRT kind or the infrared that the Wii used. The Wii really, I think, got light guns right. It was the last bastion of light gunnery. But the PlayStation 3 did get this monstrosity. Now, this is the PS Sure Shot Rifle, which is gorgeous. Extendable stock, which I think is really cool. Also, pump shotgun, which, again, very cool. Interesting point, it's actually kind of like the M16. It's got burst fire and auto fire setting. You also a second button to throw grenades, which you can lock down so you don't do it on accident. It's got this nub up here, which this is the PS navigation controller. Now, to my knowledge, there are only two games that really utilize this thing fully, and that's Killzone 3 and Rambo the video game. I've been looking for Rambo forever, but I don't have it. And people want a lot of money for that one. I think they're running like $70 or $80. So if I ever run into it, I will pick it up. But very cool rifle on this one. It's even got a slide rail for a scope attachment. I don't believe that I've ever seen anything that said Sony or anyone made a scope attachment for this. But it's just a scope rail, so you could, I guess, go buy an actual gun scope and mount it on this damn thing if you wanted to. It's a very cool gun, and you can find these actually still fairly cheap, like $30. Of course, the Move controllers aren't as cheap as they used to be, seeing as now the only use for them is VR. But I do think PlayStation still makes them. Moving on to the Wii, we get Nintendo's function, the Wii Zapper. This was their form factor that they made and is awful because I'm right-handed and it doesn't really work. It's got this whole thing kind of behind your trigger finger, which is dumb. It fits a little more comfortably in my left hand because my left hand's smaller, but really poor choice. If they got it so you can connect your nunchuck back here for your movement, and I think honestly it would have been better just to leave the nunchuck off entirely, put your trigger back here on this back handle, which they didn't do, or let me change it so that this is my trigger. It's not great and it's unwieldy, but it's a very uncomfortable peripheral, and I'm not a big fan of it. Luckily, third party's got us covered for the Wii. Now, there are a bunch of different guns. This is, in my opinion, probably the best one. This is the Nyko Sure Shot. Standard, these had like a little orange clip on the front that went over the Wiimotes. I have two of these. Mine are broken off. It's got a good weight to it, good heft. And you can see the Wiimote jumps a little there, and that's why that orange clip was there. But it stays in the cradle well enough that it's never really going to affect your playing your game. This does have a spot on the bottom of it to plug the nunchuck in because there are games that need both. And these are just really nice. If anything, as a complaint, the grip is a little wide and can get uncomfortable after extended play. But very nice controllers. Definitely worth looking up. Another one I have for the Wii is the Nerf Blaster. Now, these were made for kids. They came in bundles. There were 2 different Nerf games. There was like Nerf N-Strike and Nerf N-Strike Elite. And, I mean, look how short that handle grip is. That's a kid's handle. It fits 2 of my fingers on there. I mean, I could squeeze the third one on, but it's just not the most comfortable thing for an adult. What is kind of cool is you see in the front there were spots for 2 Nerf darts because there was actually a piece that when you took this out that went in here, and it was a Nerf blaster. You put it back on, and you could actually load a Nerf dart in the front, and there was a pull on the back to cock it, and they were functional Nerf guns. Now, I don't have that Nerf piece, unfortunately. I just have these 2 yellow guns. And the Nerf N-Strike Elite was the exact same build. The guns were blue instead of yellow, but very cool. You know, it works. I have 2 Sure Shots. I have 2 of those. And then this will be the last gun I show, and this is probably the pride of the collection next to the Silent Scope rifle. This is the Resident Evil Magnum and Knife combo for the Wii, for Umbrella and Darkside Chronicles. And this thing is ridiculous. First off, the Magnum's enormous. It's got a fairly large grip, fits well. It's got a secondary button down here on the handle, and then you got your trigger, of course. It's got a cable slide to like kind of hide your plug for your nunchuck, which goes over to the knife, which is super cool. And so you're fighting, knifing enemies and swinging at them, and it's just ridiculous. It's actually not the easiest thing to use. It's not the most comfortable thing that I've played with, but it is very, very cool and also very, very expensive at this point. This knife is made of foam, and a lot of what you'll see when you find these in the wild anymore is that the knife is torn or broken down here by the handle from too much vigorous swinging, I think. So while mine is nice and solid in one piece, I don't use the knife because I don't want to break it. But Umbrella Chronicles and Darkside Chronicles are very cool. The biggest complaint about this gun is that to use grenades and things, you have to press A. And the way you do that on this is you press your second button on the trigger, and it just slides this down over the A button. But then it tends to stick, you know, and it's really not a great design, frankly. But it is super cool looking, so it's definitely something for the Resident Evil collector out there. They made a different gun set for Umbrella Chronicles. This one was Darkside Chronicles, and the Umbrella Chronicles gun is much more akin to the Wii Zapper, and so I have not sought that one out. But that is every light gun I own, and it's a lot. I own a lot of light guns. I love those games. They're just great. You know, so hopefully you guys enjoyed the exploration. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. You can, of course, find me on Twitter, SNES is Life. And I appreciate you guys hanging out and watching this with me, and hope that you enjoy light guns. And if you do, definitely worth checking out some of these older games. Hope you guys have a good one. We'll see you later.